Who's on a sticker game? Okay. Are you guys ready? Out in the hallway? All right, well, it's good to see everybody. Was not sure who was going to be available or what was going on during the holiday break, so I just figured if anybody was in town, if you wanted to have class, then that's what we would do. So we're going to have class together. Before we get started, is there anything that we can be in prayer about? Yes, sir.
Yeah, they put my dad in the hospital yesterday.
Okay.
Running a test on him. He was dehydrated. Trying to figure out what's going on with that. But Doc said he's healthy as a horse, live forever, so I don't know what to do.
Okay.
We'll see what happens.
All right.
Yeah, Melissa's trying to take care of him.
Gotcha.
In South Carolina.
South Carolina, okay. John, can you grab the Coke machine while you're at it? Turn that off. All right. What else can we pray about?
It's been all over the news. We had a shooting at work. So prayer for
Okay.
those that were involved.
Yeah.
I know somebody got hospitalized.
Gotcha. Okay. Any other requests? Just doing prayer requests. Come on in. Hello, hello. And there's coffee. So just doing prayer requests first. Anything else to think about together? Okay, that's all of our requests. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you tonight thanking you so much for allowing us the opportunity to be in your presence, to study your word, to be an encouragement to each other. You know the requests that we've lifted up so far tonight, but you also know things that are in our private prayers or maybe things that we haven't mentioned out loud. I pray that you will answer each one of them according to your will. We know that you are living and active and you hear us, and so please take all of our requests to heart and answer them according to your will. Continue to be with the church that meets here. Be with all of us as we have travels and different holiday things that are coming up. Be with those that are traveling right now, recovering from procedures, and whatever else that may be. Please be with us and help us as we work through this study, as we think about your word. Pray all this to you in the name of your Son and our Savior, Jesus. Amen. All right, so what we're going to be thinking about tonight is Proverbs chapter 28, verse 1. It's trying to decide, just a couple of weeks that we can put together. We'll be in here tonight, and then next week I'll have a class. The week before, the Wednesday before Christmas, I'll be gone, so we won't have class in here. And then we'll have another session after the new year. So just keep an eye on social media. I'll post about our class. But what we're going to be studying tonight is also going to be next week, too.
Next week is the week before.
Sorry, I meant after Christmas.
The week after Christmas.
The week after Christmas, I'm gone. Yeah, that was good. I don't even know. What is today? Monday? All day? Anyway, so you'll know if we're in here or not. If the door's closed, then you can't get in. So let's just go off of that. How about that little piece of detail? All right, so we're going to be thinking about this verse. It's one that I've had marked down for a little while. I've been into reading Proverbs, and just different ones have been popping up to me. And I've really enjoyed thinking about this one and the implications behind this proverb. So we're going to dig into it. I have a couple of questions that are going to be sparked from this, and then we'll go to some other passages that I think can give us a little bit more information about having courageous faith. But somebody read Proverbs 28, verse 1 out loud for us.
The wicked flee when no one pursues, but the righteous are bold as a lion.
All right, and I want to say lions, right? But it's like bold as a lion. It keeps catching me off guard. But we're going to ask a couple of questions from here to see if we can get an understanding about this passage as a whole. And then, like I said, we'll go to some other places. But as you're thinking through this, and this is the good part about Proverbs, you get to have these self-contained thoughts. So you're going to be tempted, of course, to go back and forth. I am. Every time I read a proverb, I'm like, okay, what is the context? What do the other ones say? Well, it's just kind of disjointed. It doesn't match up to the other ones. So it's going to be self-contained by itself, and we need to get an understanding about what's going on. But you have these two phrases side by side. And it actually fits nicely with other proverbs that you will have a description of someone, but then it'll give you a contrast. The technical term is an antithetical statement. You have two comparisons. So it's all over the scriptures. So you think about Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, he does antithetical statements. He'll say, you have heard that it was said to those of old, but I say to you. It's that comparison. Well, Proverbs is filled with them. Psalms is filled with them. And that's what we're getting here. You have this individual, you have a wicked person, and some characteristics about them. And then you're going to have the righteous person and some characteristics about them. But let's stop and think about that first line by itself. And it says, the wicked flee when no one pursues. So let's ask the obvious question. Why do the wicked flee when no one pursues? What does that mean? And how would you attempt to answer this? You can answer back with a question, or you can make a statement, whatever comes to your mind. What does that mean, that the wicked flee when no one is pursuing them? Trying to hide? Okay. You said trying to hide it.
Whatever the thing that is that they're doing, they know it's wicked.
Okay.
So they're trying to hide it.
Okay, so conscience, kind of getting to them, or just knowing the obvious thing, trying to get away with an action. Okay.
I think of, this sounds crazy, I know, but you always hear of a high-speed chase after a routine traffic stop. Why is that? Because the guy that you're trying to do a routine traffic stop on has done something else, and he knows it, and he don't know if the police know it or not, so he just goes.
Okay. So yeah, you've got those traffic stops and then trying to turn around the other way, not wanting to get caught for something else that's going on. It might be an expired license or something along those lines, or something more nefarious. But even if, I don't know if you feel this way around just cops in general, like you start assessing yourself. If you see one of those, like, okay, make sure everything's in place. I got this. Like I knowingly have not done anything wrong, but I want to make sure that I'm not doing anything. That's a different side of this. It's another thing when you obviously know that you have done some wrong. So maybe that's the case. The wicked flee when no one is pursuing them. It's not just talking about just an aimless running. You're just going out. Of course, when I started looking up this verse and seeing what people said about it, they said, the scriptures say that we shouldn't be running. So we're running with a purpose. We should just stop there. So, of course, a lot of funny jokes that happen. But if you have the wicked that are running and no one is pursuing them, is it just aimless running? Well, no, I think it has to do with this guilty conscience, because you have this comparison, right? But it's all through the scriptures that you have this same idea. Just to have a similar look at this, let's read a few other verses. In the same chapter, somebody read Proverbs 28, verse 4.
Those who forsake the law praise the wicked, but those who keep the law strive against them.
All right, somebody read verse 15. And then verse 28.
When the wicked rise, people hide themselves, but when they perish, the righteous increase.
So the first one, we got one of those comparisons, but the rest of these are talking about a wicked person. So now let's expand this a little bit more, whether you're thinking about Proverbs in general or the scriptures as a whole. What are some characteristics of a wicked person? And we've kind of gotten to it a little bit, talking about them feeling guilt or shame for something that they're trying to cover up. But what are other things that you notice about a wicked person? Maybe use the verses that we just talked about in chapter 28, or expand that further. When we talk about a wicked person, what does that mean? Reference back some of those other verses if you need to. Go ahead.
I was just looking at the verse that I read, and at the end of it, it says, when they perish, the righteous increase. So I guess one characteristic would just be that when they're not around, or just a thing would be, when they're not around, it's easier for the righteous people to be righteous.
Okay.
Or it's more prevalent that they're there.
Okay. Yeah, so if you don't have that negative influence and all those other things that are coming, the righteous are able to flourish. But also, it shows that the wicked are trying to thwart what the righteous are doing. It may be active, it may just be by their presence in general. Okay? I like that. What else?
Those are verse 5, they do not understand the judgment. So you could contrast that they don't understand the salvation piece of it, or the moral obligation to do right.
Yeah, so they're just missing some of the nuts and bolts, but there's also this obvious part of us as humans that we should know what is right and what is wrong. And part of this, they're running when no one is pursuing them. It's not like they've been caught in a crime. Maybe they're guilty of doing something, but they know what is right and wrong to some respect. Now, that may go further, and they may not give a care about it at all, but I would say that deep down, all of us have a response to justice, that we see it, and we respond to it, and we want to know, all right, how do we really handle something like this? Because if they're not being pursued, they still have the guilt aspect. I think this is one of the great things about how we discuss morality, how we discuss the scriptures with people in general, is that we get to show them what is right and wrong, and it just makes sense. When you kind of open that up, and you're like, all right, if we really live in a world that has no supernatural component at all, there's no creator, there's no God that gives the laws and the rules and restrictions, and everybody just gets to do whatever they want to, why do we still have people arguing back and forth? Why are people still talking about a standard of justice or a standard of good or a standard of what is right? If there is nothing to control that, if there's nothing that created that from the beginning, then you can come up with whatever rules you want. But there seems to be a consensus that we all want to do what is right and learn what is right. I like that. What else? Any other characteristics about the wicked person that you notice in those in the few verses that we read, or if you think of other verses that describe wicked people?
Involving yourself with the wrong people who aren't pursuing righteousness, it like literally sucks the life out of you, and you start to feel the effects of that.
Yeah, it's exhausting being around people that don't have the same priorities in life, especially when it comes to godly things, that it can be just overwhelming, and it doesn't leave anything behind, where they literally zap you of everything that you've got, and now what do you have left? That's good. So as we think about these characteristics of a wicked person that is running when no one is pursuing them, we then have the contrast of the righteous person. And the description of this righteous person is that they are as bold as a lion. So why are we using this description? Why is he talking about righteous people and being bold as a lion? What does that mean? Why are lions bold? What do you think of when you think of a bold lion? Okay, king of the jungle. On top of the food chain, no one's going to mess with them. What about their pursuits? Kind of use that same. You think about a lion's boldness in their pursuits.
So I think about the dominant lion. He doesn't go after everything. He chooses his prey wisely, and he attacks where he's going to be most successful. He doesn't chase down everything, and usually the male lion lets some of the others do the work for him, and he comes in for the kill.
Yeah.
So I mean, so lots of. I heard somebody speaking about lions recently, and he had lots of analogies that I hadn't thought of before.
Yeah, I like that one of being strategic with what you've got. So a lion that's bold, they're not just going to run right into a random herd. They're going to pick off the one that they need to. They're going to single it out, be very strategic, utilize other lions, pack mentality, all that working together. So I think about when a lion is pursuing their prey, that they are bold. What a lion is able to take down. Of course, they can take out a weak prey, but they also have a lot of strength to do more than that. I don't know what your interactions are with lions. Mine are very minimal, except for the ones that are at the zoo that literally do nothing. Roman loves them. Kinley and I went on that sky lift at the zoo, and it was during nighttime, so all the lions were gone, but you go almost right over it. So I was telling Kinley, I was like, the lions are down there. And she's like, they just lie around all the time. She was more worried about the giraffes because I think she thought they were going to get close to our feet. She was more concerned about them than the actual lions. But I love this description, though, of the righteous being bold as lions. When you think about boldness, maybe other words that come to your mind, because they're the ones that come to me, I think about courage, determination, bravery, things along those lines. And if we as righteous people are to approach life, we're going to be very different than the wicked. We should see life, we should see other people differently. And we should have boldness to us versus those guys that are trying to cover up and just run away even when no one is pursuing them.
This is kind of like a scattered thought, but it made me think of like how God is called the Lion of Judah, and how like we're made in His image. Then like the comparison of how we're supposed to be lions and how God is called the Lion of Judah, and how you see Him in that context, like how He fights for His people, and how He is I don't know. It makes me think of like how God fights for His people and how we are supposed to be like pursuing Him, I guess, in the same way, and pursuing things that are right in the same way that He pursued Judah's enemies and that He pursued a relationship with Judah. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that analogy, it spans all the way through Scripture. And I do love that heading of Jesus as the Lion of Judah, that it shows strength. It shows being able to defeat things, like you said. And if we know that is our model, then we can take on those similar characteristics as well and think about ourselves. So we need to be bold. Like I said, I'm going to pull in some other passages, but I wanted to hold this idea in our mind, and we're going to come back to it next week as well. But I want to give a little bit of a comparison. I told you, when you think about boldness, other words that may come to mind: courage, bravery, valor, things along those lines. If you consider courage as a virtue, you start looking into how people study virtue in general, you've got the topic itself, which should be the middle ground. So let's say that I want to be a courageous person. There's also an extreme of this virtue. You've got something that's in excess, and you got one that is kind of missing from it. On one side of this, you have someone that is overcome with rashness. So we should control ourselves. We should be in the middle. You should be a courageous individual. But if you have someone that is just way on the other side of courage, and they are reckless or they are rash in their actions, what does that look like? How would you compare someone that is rash versus someone that is courageous? Or you can even refer to animals if that helps you out. If you think of an animal that is just rash in their actions versus a courageous lion.
Fleeing is rashness.
Okay.
And a rash decision is not a thought-out decision. Fleeing when no one's chasing you is not a very well thought-out decision. It's really cowardice to be that little
Mm-hmm.
compared to the courage on the other side of it. The courage and the boldness and I can take on anything.
But I don't. You know, I think that's something too, is that a lion could take on a lot of different things, but he doesn't. There's a lot of pursuits that we can take in life, and if we just start trying to do more and more stuff and we start acting rashly, you're going to overload your plate. I think we can probably relate to that, right, of putting too much on our plates at a time, where we think that we can accomplish it and we think we're doing something really good, and then our rash decisions, we're not even able to sift through all of it, and they end up being something negative. You don't want to be rash. You don't want to be reckless in your decisions in life. You want to stay in the middle. You want to stay courageous. But there's also the deficient side on the other end. And Dean, you mentioned it a little bit. But someone that is lacking courage, they're overcome with cowardice, a coward. So think about these three distinctions now that we have them all up together. We want to be in the middle. We want to focus on courage and make the right kind of decisions. We don't want to be reckless. We don't want to be rash. We don't want to be, just everything that we do, we think, oh yeah, I've got all the courage, I can take on the world. But you also don't want to be depleted of it either. That's where you're going to run away further from what you need to be doing.
I think that courage sort of kind of indicates a sense of like confidence, and rashness indicates more of like arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
And then like cowardice would just be not having it at all.
Yeah.
Because like you mentioned, like with courage, you're able to acknowledge that like I can do this, but you choose not to because there's like a strategy behind it. And with like rashness, I think a good example of rashness would be just running into a fight with no plan at all, and it's just like, oh, well, I'm better than them, so I'm gonna win no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
You're just not prepared at all.
Yeah. It's like, what man going into a battle doesn't count his troops, right? Does that sound, I don't know, that sounds something wise. But that's what we're supposed to be about. And calculating before you take on a project, calculating, do I have enough resources to do it? All those kind of things. Thank you for that illustration as well. So you've got these three. So as we just keep building on this verse in Proverbs 28, verse 1, what does it mean to the righteous are as bold as a lion? Boldness, if we're going to stay centered, we can use the word courage and a lot of other things. We don't want to go too far in our actions. We don't want to have too little. We want to be right where God wants us to be. Now, let's pull in some other passages, and y'all jump in anytime you have a thought. Some of these things are what we've studied previously, if you've been around for some of our classes where we worked through parts of the Old Testament. And I've just kind of collected all of them as I've been looking at this verse, so it's kind of a compilation of what's going on here. But this verse has stuck out to me in Deuteronomy 28, 66 through 67. I'll get somebody to read this in just a second. But what's going on is that the Israelites are about to go into the Promised Land, and Moses is giving them the law a second time, so he's kind of building on top of it, and he's saying, look, all the people that came up out of Egypt, they're dead in the wilderness. We have a new generation. You're about to go into this promised land, but when you go in, just be aware that there are great nations over there that you're going to be in control of bringing down, Jericho and all those other people. And remember, the spies went into the promised land. They're like, look, it's filled with giants, and in the eyes of them, we are just little grasshoppers, and that's how we see ourselves. That's that belittling aspect even of our own feelings. And at the end of Deuteronomy, Moses is telling them, he says, look, if you go in this land and you lose focus, you don't take courage, you don't take resilience toward God and his rules and regulations, you're going to be overcome. And this is one of the curses or one of the characteristics of if you decide to pursue the wicked way of living. Somebody read Deuteronomy 28, 66 and 67. Now, part of this, building into it, he's going to talk about exile and all these other things, but I think there's a condition here that is characteristic to someone that is outside of God. What are some key ideas or terms that stick out to you when you think about the wicked and what that life looks like and you're not having courage to live for God anymore? What are things that stick out to you? Dread. What does that mean? We think of dread. He goes further into it. He says, in the morning you'll say, if only it were evening. In the evening you'll say, if only it were morning. Have you ever felt that where it's like you're just overcome with it could be a lot of things. You've got a lot of burdens on you. You're trying to escape something. It's just like, I just wish this night would be over. I'm just ready to get to the end of the day to go to bed. I've felt that way. Just dreading the moments that you're awake. Dreading the next moment that's coming and just wanting to get past it. For the wicked, those that are away from God, I know, like I said, he's talking about exile and all these other things, but I think there's characteristics. Someone that is away from God is that you just live in dread. There is no happiness. There is no hope. Okay, what else sticks out to you? What about that first line? Your life shall hang in doubt before you. The dread aspect, not looking forward to what is coming, just wanting to get past it, but to have doubt about your life, not knowing anything about who you are and what you want to be. And because God gives us purpose, right? If we're bold as a lion, we have purpose. Someone that is bold, they have their pursuit set in front of them where they want to go. But someone that their life is just hanging in the balance and they have no idea what they want to accomplish, that's a terrible place to be. I don't know if you've been in that condition before, if you've felt that way. But I think these are good characteristics of somebody that is living a wicked life, that you live in doubt, you don't know what your life is going to be, and then you are just dreading the next moments, that your heart shall feel and the sights that your eyes shall see. living in that and seeing that where they're going to go into this land. He said this is supposed to be a promised land. This is supposed to be happy. It's a land that's going to be overflowing with milk and honey, and you're going to want to live here. Actually, your house is already built for you. The vineyard's already prepared for you. You're going to go there. Everything's going to be easy if you'll just listen to God. But if not, the house is going to be taken down. The vineyards will be trampled, and you won't say, this is a place that I want to live. You'll actually be trying to get out of there as quick as possible. But the righteous will live as bold as a lion. Bring on what may. I'm going to accomplish this. I'm going to do whatever God wants me to do and plan my life accordingly. All right, so what does this look like in practice? One of the stories that popped up, of course, you may think about David and Goliath. Got the small boy that's going to fight against this huge giant. Of course, he's going to have courage. He's going to have to do what he needs to do. I think one of the verses that we overlook is the dialogue leading to that battle between David and Goliath. And this is the description. This is one of the things that David says. Somebody read 1 Samuel 17, 45 through 47.
You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And I will give the dead bodies of the host of the Philistines this day to the birds of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord saves not with sword and spear. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand.
All right, so here's our contrast. We had some of these descriptions about a wicked person living in dread with no hope of their life versus someone that is directed toward God. So knowing David and his decisions that he makes even later on in life. But right here in this context, facing his enemy, what are things that stick out to you here to show and reinforce this idea of the righteous are as bold as a lion? It's going to start with that one man, but there's a lot more that's going to happen. Yeah?
I really like that David says, you have a spear and a sword and a javelin, but I came with God, so you brought a knife to a gunfight.
I like that. That's very good. If you were to look up, and I can't think of any exact references right now, but Psalms and Proverbs for sure, where it talks about not putting your dependence in chariots and the horses. That's what these armies are doing. They're looking at their own strength, their own abilities versus what God is able to offer, because they don't really know that. They should be running at this point. But I love that he's coming fully prepared with God on his side.
Billy,
Yeah.
you go back to verse 43. What he's saying here about you come to me in the sword and spear is contrast to what Goliath just said. And then he comes running up. Goliath says, you think I'm a dog, you come to me with sticks. So what did David have in his hand? Little slings and rocks. So he turns it back on us. You come to me with a sword and spear, and I got something better than that.
Yeah.
I cannot stand in sports when we hear on the announcers say, it's the David and Goliath thing. Goliath never stood a chance.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That is the worst analogy in the history of analogies. Goliath never stood a chance.
Yeah. Well, go back to in chapter 17. Let's see.
48. What does David do? He runs.
Hmm.
No doubt in his step, buddy. He's not sneaking down there to Goliath. He's going after him.
Yeah.
It's a done deal in his mind.
Well, go back to verse 30. I'm going to start in verse 33. And Saul said to David, "You're not able to go against the Philistines to fight with him, for you are but a youth, and he is a man of war from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant used to keep sheep for his father. And when there came a lion or a bear and took a lamb by the flock, I went after him and struck him and delivered it out of his mouth. And if he rose against me, I caught him by his beard and struck him and killed him. Your servant has struck down both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God." You don't want to mess with this joker. It's like going in, he's like, yeah, I grabbed that cat by the beard and pulled him down, and I'm worried about this man over here? No. I mean, that's just full confidence. And it's not just in his abilities, because he's not going to win this fight if God's not on his side. And we've seen that reoccur over and over again with the Israelites, where, they had, this massive army that was in front of them, and they had just a small little group of people, and they were able to overcome them. You think about Gideon and all these other people. We've seen the being outnumbered, but the only way that works is if God is on your side. And what, is really bothering David is this description here of this defying God, going against him. That's one of the characteristics of the wicked, right? That they are going against some standard of what God has put into place that we should know. And he's like, no, we're going to uphold the name of God. And I think this is a good characteristic, once again, of someone that is as bold as a lion, as someone that has fought against a lion. He said, bring on the giant. It's not a big deal. All right, let's go one more time in the Old Testament passage here in 2 Chronicles chapter 32. I just pulled out this part of the passage, but I want to have the chapter in front of me if we needed it. So at this point in Israel's history, you've got all these kings that have passed on, that you got the divided kingdom, all this kind of stuff. All right, you have bad kings, a couple of good ones that were in Judah, all of them in Israel were bad. And the Assyrians are coming to take over Judah. Israel's already gone. The Assyrians already took over them. Eventually, the Babylonians are coming. But they're threatening Judah, which is Jerusalem. It's that last stronghold. And the Assyrians are threatening Hezekiah, and he's the king there. And they're talking about, we're going to surround you. We're going to cut you off. We're going to take over your city. And there's going to be nothing left of you. Well, Hezekiah is bold in his prayers. And you can read the same account in Isaiah, because Isaiah is the prophet that works with Hezekiah. But I'm going to drop down in this passage, and I've got a couple of verses here at the tail end, but I do want to start in verse 1, if somebody would be willing to read those 8 verses for us. 2 Chronicles chapter 32, starting in verse 1.
After these things and these acts of faithfulness, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came and invaded Judah and encamped against the fortified cities, thinking to win them for himself. When Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib had come and intended to fight against Jerusalem, he planned with his officers and his mighty men to stop the water of the springs that were outside the city, and they helped him. A great many people were gathered, and they stopped all the springs and the brook that flowed through the land, saying, why should the king of Assyria come and find much water? He set to work resolutely and built up all the wall that was broken down and raised towers upon it. And outside it he built another wall and strengthened the millow in the city of David. He also made weapons and shields in abundance, and he set combat commanders over the people and gathered them together to him in the square at the gate of the city, and spoke encouragingly to them, saying, be strong and courageous, do not be afraid or dismayed before the king of Assyria and all the horde that is with him. For there are more with us than with him. With him is an arm of flesh, but with us is the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battles. And the people took confidence from the words of Hezekiah king.
All right, so, this story is just filled with a lot of confidence, but I just wanted to come in on what Hezekiah says. But look at his actions leading up to this. So he knows this army's coming in, and they've already taken out multiple nations. They've already taken out Israel, the people right next to them, their kinsmen, and now they have one city left. I mean, it is just Jerusalem. Although it's a large city, apparently it had been broken down. They had been pummeled a few times. So what does he start doing in preparation for this army coming? Building everything up. Right? He's building the walls, building towers, making weapons, cutting off all the water supply in the land so that when the army comes in, they have nothing to live off of. He is completely prepared and ready to stay secluded in the city if he needs to. That's going to take some boldness to know, look, all you people in the fields, all the things that you're used to, we're not going to be able to handle that. We're going to come in here together to be able to fight against this. But what is his purpose and what is his standard? He said, this army's coming, and he has an arm of flesh. Similar to what David was saying. It's like, you're coming at me with swords and javelins and all this kind of stuff. You have an arm of flesh. But with us is the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battles. This is a good verse, and it's very encouraging. I also don't want to stop here and think that God is going to, people have taken this out of context and even made a song that just repeats this phrase over and over again about 500 times. But God fighting our battles. It's not this complete passive action that we have of God's going to do everything for us and I just sit back here and do nothing. Is that being as bold as a lion? No. you have confidence in what God is able to do, and he will fight our battles, but it's on his terms. Hezekiah already knew that if they stayed faithful, this city would not leave them. God promised that back in Deuteronomy 28. He said, if you stay true to me, you're not going to have another nation that will come in and wipe you out. And part of his prayers throughout this whole story reinforces that. So when he's making this statement, he's like, you've got an arm of flesh. You're going to trust in your chariots. You're going to trust in this. You're going to trust in that. We've got the Lord our God on our side. It's with him that we are fighting. He fights our battles because he is our standard. He is our stronghold. He is our shield. He is our everything. We're going to live by that. So as we start taking these examples, and there's going to be a lot more, and like I said, we're going to continue this over into next week as well. We're working off this idea of a courageous faith. If we want to be as bold as a lion, what are some things that we can take to ourselves, some bits of encouragement just to put into practice? Well, when I think about confidence, I think about courage. In a New Testament example, I think about Hebrews chapter 10. I just want to draw a couple of points from Hebrews chapter 10 to reinforce what we've talked about so far tonight, and then we'll see where it takes us next week. Hebrews chapter 10. We're going to start in verse 19. We're going to do 2 verses at a time. But what are these specific things that we can hold on to that help us in difficult moments? Well, first off, if we want to be as bold as lions, we have to have confidence. All right, so somebody read, we're in Hebrews chapter 10, so somebody read verses 19 and 20.
Therefore, brethren, having boldness to enter the holiest by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way which he consecrated for us through the veil, that is, his flesh.
All right, so it talks about here having boldness or confidence, depending on where you're looking. But why do we have boldness to enter into the holy places? Jesus. He's the one that came in and said, you know what? Yeah, you're weak in your flesh. You're overcome with sin, but I'm going to pay the price for you. I'm going to set a standard. I'm going to take your place so that you can then be in me. And if you are in me, that's where your strength is going to come from. So if we want to be as bold as lions and have a courageous faith, you got to have Christ on your side. You got to have that blood covering you. Because if, pulling that illustration like what Nate was talking about, if he is the Lion of Judah, take on those characteristics ourselves. Okay? Let's look at the next couple of verses. Somebody read 22 and 23.
Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works.
Miss verse 21, but that's a good one too. And since we have a great high priest over the house of God, have that in there as well. But I think about in these verses that we need to have conviction. So you got to have confidence, but then you have to have conviction. Look at, he says, all right, you know that you can enter into the holy places because of Jesus. Now, where does that come from? He says, let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, with our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure waters. If you are all in and you are convicted on these things, you know that the blood of Christ is cleansing you. You know that you are no longer living a wicked life. You have that evil conscience that has been fixed and your body's washed with pure water. That whole process that's going in, you have to be all in. So if we have confidence and we have full conviction knowing that he is on our side, we should be as bold as lions. And then the last part of that, somebody read, I don't know why my verse references got off, so just to keep us in the full sentence, somebody read verses 23 through 25.
Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near.
So we have a lot of self-sufficiency, and we need to be aware of that, and that's where we don't want to be reckless, where we think we're doing this by ourselves. Courage is going to have a middle ground. We're not going to run away from a battle. We're not going to run away from a fight. We're going to stay right where we need to be. But part of this thing is that we can have comfort because we have other people too. Back in verse 23, he says, hold fast the confession of our hope. We studied, a couple of Sundays ago, talking about confession and how we are tied together because of Christ and because of that great confession that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. But then come into verse 24, and let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works. What does that conjure up to you? stirring up one another to love and good works. What does that mean? How's that accomplished?
When I think of stirring something up, like I think of igniting it, or being some sort of change agent. And so, like encouraging a group or something to do something differently, to do something better than what they've done before.
Yeah. The conviction and the confidence that we have, we don't want it to waver. We have to be aware that even wicked people can be confident, and even righteous people can lose their boldness. We can't think that we're impervious, where nothing's going to happen to us and everything's going to be fine. We also have to acknowledge that we can become weak. If he has given us this challenge to stir up one another to love and good works, if you read the whole of Hebrews, you'll find this reoccurring theme of, look, don't be overcome, go to God, have confidence in him. Don't allow that negativity to squelch your faith, but stir up one another, because it's hard. We're going to get burdened at times. There are going to be some of the biggest challenges that happen in our lives that we're not prepared for, potentially that could happen to us. But doesn't it mean something when somebody comes and puts their arm around you and says, we can do this together? I know you're struggling right now. I know you're hurting. I know you've got this going on, but we can get through this together. Part of my boldness, it should ideally as a Christian, part of my boldness should come from you, because I'm not in this by myself. If I were, I probably would have been burned out a long time ago. But I'm not, and you're not. And you can probably look around this room or think about this church or think about scenarios as a whole that have helped you build up your faith so you can feel more bold. A lion out by itself can accomplish a lot. But when you got a bunch of lions working together, what they're able to bring down, I think that's boldness. So if you're stirring up one another to love and good works, loving God first and love your neighbor as yourself, but also how are we going to put that love into practice? We get the part that comes from it, verse 25. Excuse me. Not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another all the more as you see the day drawing near. We've got today. We don't know about tomorrow. We don't know how much time we've got left, or we've got a moment right now. Let's not waste it doing other things. Let's utilize it to the best of our ability. I know I'm talking to a Wednesday night group that's here. There are the holidays and all this kind of travel. But we're about to walk out these doors. We're about to go back into the world. We're going back to our families. We're going back to work. We're going to other places where we might need some encouragement to be more bold. How can we utilize what's here right now and not neglect this and help ourselves get to where we need to be? So, anyways, just wanted to draw on a few of these ideas based off of Proverbs 28, verse 1, and we will tack on some more next week. But do we finish up? Any questions, comments? Cool. All right. Well, hopefully you enjoyed those verses, and you can study them this week. That's what I got.